headline insights. It's a GLC update as well, with none other than God's newsman, Wally Wood. Hello, Wally.
Hello there, Brent. I'm glad to be here. And as I was thinking this week about what we will be talking about, of course, in the big news today is Israel and the Middle East. And I don't know about you, but I still get a lot of people wanting to go to Israel.
Right.
And of course, what's happening now is affecting their decisions as to when to go. I know that I've been invited to return in February to host a tour of the nation. And this will be my second trip there. The first one was in 1982 as a guest of Mr. Begin, the Prime Minister. And he paid my way over there for 2 weeks. It was during the war in southern Lebanon at the time, otherwise known as the PLO War. And that came on the heels of the PLO launching as many as 300 missiles into northern Israel per day. And Israel had been long tolerant of the practice, and they finally got fed up with it and decided to do something about it. And that's when they, quote unquote, invaded southern Lebanon. And what transpired at that particular point was that the PLO was holed up in a castle, a 16th century castle, if I recall correctly, the age of it. It was a 3-story castle known as Beaufort Castle on the very border of southern Lebanon and northern Israel. And the Israelis have this high respect for antiquities. And given the fact that the PLO was occupying this castle and had done so for 7 years, kind of stood in the way of Israel having any kind of response to those missiles. But the day finally came when they decided to take out that castle. And this was their initial move into southern Lebanon. Now, I was a newsman at the time, working on a radio station belonging to Jimmy Swaggart, part of his network. And I was news director. And so I was giving daily updates of the progress of the war. And in the course of time, the Israeli consulate here in Houston began listening to my newscasts. And they made the determination publicly that I was the only news announcer in America that did not use the term Israel's invasion of Lebanon in my newscasts.
Right.
And this intrigued them. So they began to record those newscasts and the commentaries and send them off to Tel Aviv. And Mr. Begin, the prime minister at the time, said, well, let's get the guy over here. So the Begin administration paid my way to Israel in August of 1982. And I was there for 2 whole weeks, giving live reports back to the Houston station of my experiences and what I was encountering while there. I came within about 50 miles of Beirut, heard the bombing going on, things of this nature. And I thought I would share it with you today because I know that you have a connection with Israel through your Israel TV network that you all had for a while, correct?
Texans for Israel, which had been a supporter of GLC, loves GLC, God's Learning Channel, started a digital RTMP network called Israel TV Network. And some GLC viewers have watched that as well. Of course, now ITVM has concluded, and the viewers, any viewers out there, they're going to be able to enjoy some of the programs they enjoyed at ITVM now on GLC. Coming back home full circle, and everyone is happy. The GLC not only has survived, but it is now reemerging for such a time as this. And of course, 2024 is going to be a crucial year. We're going to need GLC more than ever. But yes, Texans for Israel, longtime supporters of GLC, started that RTMP digital network, and we're very excited to see those efforts continue now under the banner of GLC. The
Good. Well, it's interesting because what I thought I would do is for those visitors or those listeners who still want to go to Israel, and a lot of people do, I thought I would share with them some of my experiences while there, just to kind of help set the stage
Right.
because there's several things that take place that could be recalled as culture shock when you come into that country. One of which, of course, my first expectation upon arriving in by air into the nation was to see a lot of camels and sheep, and
Right.
they're not there.
You mean you weren't seeing shepherd boys and
No, I was
swinging
seeing
slings and
I was
such?
seeing super highways and tall buildings and cars. So believe it or not, that was my very first culture shock of seeing
I
modern
love it.
freeways outside the metropolis of Tel
Right.
Aviv.
Right.
And but the next shocker was even more intense. Coming in for a landing, you could see war machines pushed to the side of the freeways, tanks, yes, troop carriers, airplanes, missiles, rockets pushed to the side of the freeways.
Right.
And this really, I was not expecting to see. You don't see it over here, but it became a very clear indicator that this land did not come cheap. And everywhere you go in that country, you see the ghosts of the war machines of the enemy, parked to the side of roads and in parks and things of this nature as a reminder. And even one of the children's parks, I saw a Soviet tank that had been painted in brilliant colors for the children to play on, as again an indoctrination into the fact that this land did not come to us free.
Right.
We had to pay a price for it. And so the entire generation of people are raised on this idea that you may have to fight for the land again.
Right.
And it really got my attention, Brent, to see the images of scars in this country like we're not accustomed to seeing over here.
Right.
So that was the first indicator to me that I was in somewhere other than Houston, Texas.
Right. And here they are yet again,
having to fight for the land. Yes.
Having to fight for their survival. Yeah, I've always found it intriguing through the years. You would see ladies in prom dresses, beautiful young ladies, but they're wearing AK-47s.
Yes. Yes.
And it just goes to show that right now, as Israel is at war with Hamas, they are a warrior culture.
Yeah.
You would think after all the persecution, after all the atrocities through the centuries that have been committed against Israel, that the world would wake up.
Yes.
But money talks, and the mainstream media feeds the hate, feeds the propaganda. I saw a meme recently of a Palestinian taking a stick and stirring it in a bee's nest and then running away crying as the bees are pursuing, and then the BBC and CNN and even Fox focusing in on the poor victim when they themselves are the perpetrators of terror. And nobody cared about that area. There was never a Palestine. There was never a government. There was never a currency. It's all propagandized. Palestine means Philistine, literally a derogatory term, given by the one who sacked Jerusalem, wanted to insult them, to add insult to injury, to the survivors of the massacre of Jerusalem and of Israel. So here we are, such a political thing. And then even in our own country, I was watching Private Ryan last night, watching the beach scene in Normandy. And I thought, oh my gosh, what would the greatest generation say to those of us who have watched our freedoms and just stood by while communists and modern day Nazis take away our rights? What would they say to us? Those who watch their fellow
probably would not be kind.
It would not be kind. And folks, we can't put our head in the sand, but Israel has had to learn. And of course, they from the very inception, and the 6-day war, the world went against Israel.
Yes.
It seemed, when I was a young boy, I would always think, America will never turn against Israel. Well, look at where we are right now. even in our own halls of Congress and Senate, those chanting praises for Hamas and
Right.
the Jihadi Five from the river to the sea,
Right.
and even being turned on by a fellow leftist, but they are a warrior culture. When you were over there, Wally, did you notice that as well? Did you notice all the plainclothes
I was just
people?
I was about to comment on your statement a while ago that prom dresses notwithstanding, it is another culture shock to see the average citizenry carrying weapons as they go about their daily business. Another total shock to me was to see a small group of Israeli soldiers standing on a street corner in Jerusalem having a prayer meeting or a Bible study openly. And it gives me chills to think of it even now. We don't see that in America. And yet this was a common practice. And again, I'm speaking 1982, so I don't know how the society has changed over there since then. But at that time, soldiers and citizens together on the street corner, open Bibles and praying as I'm in a bus driving by. So that's telltale that, again, part of their DNA is their cultural historic connection to God, mm-hmm. and to the God of the land and their dependency upon him. One of the most telltale moments early on, because I wasn't there maybe 2 days, and Mr. Begin had given me a chaperone and a couple of armed guards. And he told me, he said, anywhere you want to go, you just tell them and they'll take you there. And that was carte blanche, that was an honor.
Wow.
And so probably on day 2, we were headed toward Jerusalem and we came upon Bethany. Now, I knew nothing about Bethany at the time, so this was all a new experience to me. And what I remember most is that the suburban streets in Bethany are kind of like that of San Francisco, kind of hilly. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so we came to a particular subdivision and we pulled off to the side of the road and we were all back in to get out of the Volkswagen bus and stretch our legs. So I followed my entourage up this hill in this suburban neighborhood. And Brant, I can only tell you what I experienced that as close as I can to a visual. As we're cresting the top of the hill, my entourage has stepped to the side and I'm walking up to the top of that hill, and in front of me about maybe a mile, here comes up out of the abyss or the pit below, in the mist, the eastern wall of Jerusalem, the sealed gate of Jerusalem.
Wow.
This first time with my own eyes, I've seen this, and rising up in front of me. And I'm standing there frozen, knowing where I'm standing, and got a little misty-eyed. I turned around and my entourage was behind me, looking at me. And they said, we knew you would like this. That's why we brought you here.
Wow.
Sneaky Pete. I'm standing there realizing that I am on the flight path of the returning Messiah as his feet would touch the Mount of Olives. And here I am at the top of the Mount of Olives, overseeing the Eastern Gate.
Wow.
So
wow.
It's a moment that I'll never be able to capture again, but it's something that I'll never forget.
Wow.
And so we went into the city of Jerusalem. And I don't know about you, but I've done my share of interviews of those who were active in the 6-day war.
Right, right.
And the miracle stories that come out, their testimonies, their combined testimonies, it could fill a book.
Wally, while we're talking about that, I think, nothing builds your faith like miracles, real life testimonies, and miracles. And I think it would be good for you to share one of those things that you remember from your interviews.
One of those miracles from the 6-day war?
Yes, yes.
I was interviewing the consulate general of Israel, and his first name was David. I know the rest of his name too, but we were in the studio, and I asked him because he told me that he was a veteran of the 6-Day War.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what miracle stories did you experience while there? And he said, probably the biggest one. He said, me and my guides were pinned down by opposing fire coming from the top of the Mount of Olives.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, bullets were flying all over us, and we couldn't advance. The only thing we could do was call in for air support.
Wow.
And he said, so here we are pinned to the ground, and it was the Egyptians or the Syrians firing upon them. And he said, all of a sudden we began to hear the sound of approaching jet engines. He said, now this was a clear day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And as the minutes passed by, the sound of those engines got closer and closer and closer, to the point where even the enemy at the top of the Mount of Olives, they stopped firing at us and started looking in the skies around them. Where are these engines coming from? He said, all of a sudden, 3 Israeli jets appeared over us, having flown the streets of Jerusalem in tight formation around the corners of the streets.
Wow.
And below building level. Now, capture this, below building level. And they emerged from the city, flew over our heads, and dropped bombs on the enemy position at the top of the Mount of Olives.
Wow.
Caught everybody by surprise. And he said, needless to say, we won the battle that day. He said, but we all agreed this was a God thing.
Yes, it was.
This wasn't so much an Israeli army thing or Air Force thing. This was a God thing. 3 jets flying at full speed through the streets of Jerusalem below building level to take out the enemy at the top of the hill. And so, yeah, I remember that story dramatically. But another side part, because, and this is a story that I've never told you, I don't believe, my source, my news source of information that I was reporting while here in the States, I was avoiding the AP, UPI media rip and read sources on the progress of the war, because they did include hidden in each copy Israel's invasion of Lebanon. And I just avoided that altogether. But I had a friend who was embedded within the Israeli army, the advancing Israeli army going into Lebanon. And he was an American. And he was sending me faxes every day of what he was experiencing and the progress of the war. And it was his faxes that I was reading over the air. I capture this.
Wow.
His name was Vendel, Vendyl Jones.
And you've heard that. I've heard that name before.
Well, you take the V and the L off his name, his first name, you have Indy Jones.
Yep. The man who, go ahead.
He was the inspiration behind the story of Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right.
We were friends for over 20 years.
Wow.
And he was sending me these daily faxes that I was reading. And that's what got the consulate's attention here in Houston.
Wow.
And Mr. Begin sending me over there. So I owe Vendel Jones.
But you didn't know that, people.
Yeah. And what ties this off neatly is the fact that he never knew that the movie was being made.
Right.
And he and his wife, because of their curiosity of the theme of the movie, went to see it for the first time in Tel Aviv.
Right.
And he began to recognize some scenes in there that were very parallel to his own life story.
Right.
Including the big stone in the cemetery area there. Okay. That was an experience that Vendel had. And it wasn't until the crew, the cast and crew rolled by at the end, they saw a familiar name. And this gentleman was a playwright of the movie itself.
Wow.
And Bendel remembered him from one of his earlier expeditions for the ashes of the red heifer in Israel. And they would sit around at night and Bendel would tell his stories. Little did he know that 20 years later, he would hit the big screen. And so Bendel never claimed personally to be the inspiration of the Indiana Jones series,
But he
but
was.
he did write to the
He
producers
was.
and tell them that these were parallels to his own story.
Yep.
And they denied that he had any right to anything in the story. So he began to use their theme music wherever he went to speak publicly. And
Yep.
in the course of time, they sued him,
Mm-hmm.
and he threatened them with a countersuit.
Yep.
And they backed off on their suit because they didn't want the public black mark against the possible real character of the series. One other fascinating piece of testimony that you'll find interesting: his oldest son was born with kidney problems,
Right.
and he grew up under all kinds of treatment and medications and things like this. And here he is in his early adulthood, and he was in bad need of 2 kidneys, not just one. And so in their search for a donor, they found that Vendel, his father, was a qualifying donor. So they get the guys into the operating room in Tel Aviv. They open them up, only to find that Indiana Jones had 4 kidneys, not 2.
I remember you talking about that.
And it was a shock to them because, of course, kidneys are soft tissue, so it's not picked up on X-ray.
Wow.
And so his son got 2 new kidneys from his dad, and his dad kept 2 for himself. And it's in the annals of history right there at the Tel Aviv hospital.
Is that amazing or what?
4 kidneys. Huh?
The man with 4 kidneys.
4 kidneys. So it's remarkable what God does.
Wow.
When he chooses to do it for his greatest glory. And for me to have been over there, and I remember on the flight back, I think a 12-hour flight back. We're in the 747. I was in the upper deck and looking out over the Mediterranean. I said, Lord, this was remarkable. This was fun, miraculous, something I didn't pray for or expect. Why did you send me here? And I heard the Lord say, that's for later. Now you sleep.
Wow.
Brant, I woke up as we were coming into LaGuardia Airport in New York, 12 hours later, and to the sound of a French Concorde outside our window. And the stewardess told me, she said, Mr. Wood, we did everything but splash water in your face to get you to wake for meals. And
wow.
You were not to be disturbed.
Wow.
I said, well, now I know how Adam must have felt when God put him to sleep. When God says you're going to sleep, boy, you're going to sleep.
You're going to sleep, man.
I slept that entire trip from Tel Aviv to New York City without being awakened.
Wow.
So I am always awed by how God shows up and shows off. And I wanted to share my experience with your viewers on my unique, remarkable journey to Israel. One more thing about Vendel. He was the American hero of the 6-Day War.
Wow.
And he was written up in Time magazine and appeared on a number of TV shows, TV talk shows here in America around that same time,
right,
as the American hero, because he was colorblind. And the Israelis discovered his unique ability to pinpoint enemy positions around Israel and the deserts of Israel, and with accuracy. And so they were able to take out those positions because of Vendel's colorblindness, and they called it a unique colorblindness. So I know nothing about that, but it got Vendel in the news.
Well, Vendel also was in search of something.
Yes.
And it wasn't the Ark of the Covenant.
No, it was ashes of the red heifer.
the ashes of the red heifer.
Yeah.
People don't know that. So Steven Spielberg was inspired by Vendel. You know, as we've been speaking, we are recording this live on the GLC Facebook page, and I monitor the comments. Appreciate the comment there. And that's you. It's still live. Love and appreciate you. Fine truth teller, Shirley Todd. Thank you, Shirley. We love you. I also am looking at the headlines, the world's narrative. Folks, you can't trust the world's narrative. You can trust God's narrative. And something that would be considered breaking news to a lot of you is what Vendel was looking for.
Yes.
The ashes of the red heifer. Do you have any updated information on that?
Well, in my RevFile TV YouTube channel, I did do a few reports on that. But let me give you a little background information here. Vendel was a pastor of a Baptist church in Temple, Texas, until he turned 50 years old. And then he resigned his pastorship to go to Israel and put himself through Hebrew University so that he could learn the language of the Jews. Such was his love for Israel. And as a result of that, he was able to read the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Copper Scroll within the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it's there that he found a description of where the ashes of the red heifer are being held. And if you know anything about the background here, when God gave Moses the instructions on the red heifer and the sacrifice of the red heifer, it was to be used as a pinch at a time in the laver, the water outside the temple. And that water would be used to sprinkle the utensils inside the temple and to anoint the priests for their work. And this was to go on until such time as the ashes would run out. Now, they were held in an urn that was made from the ashes of the red heifer that had been sacrificed.
Right.
So both the ashes and the urn were part of that animal. In the course of time, as the ashes would begin to run down and to diminish, then and only then would another perfect red heifer be born into an Israeli herd. They were not born before then. So again, God was directly involved. Well, in the course of history, there have been 9 urns containing the ashes of the red heifer. It was this 9th urn that Vendel was in search of because it was confiscated at the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD and hidden in the catacombs, the grave of Zadok, the last high priest of Israel at the time. This is according to the Copper Scroll. So Vendel went in search, following the directions of the Copper Scroll, for this 9th urn so that it could be retrieved and it can be reinstated into the Israeli practice of renewing the daily sacrifice and bring about the construction of the next temple in Israel.